So good morning, everyone. I want to say thank you so much for joining us today for this program, the Chamber of Influence programming offered by the Petoskey Chamber. We want to help build stronger businesses and organizations in the region through education opportunities and experiences, such as what is taking place today. We want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Odawa Casino for being our sponsor for our 2025 Winfluence programming. They're very much committed to helping businesses and organizations in our community grow and improve. And we are just so excited to partner with Ross Whitmore from Northern Technology Services for this first Expert Connect event. It's going to be an engaging webinar designed to help businesses thrive in the digital age, give you some great information and tools that you can take back and implement right away. And with that, I am going to turn it over to you, Ross.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. So my name is Ross Whitmore. Essentially, I'm a Petoskey native here. Graduated Petoskey High School, class of 2010. And then in 2015, we set out and founded Northern Technology Services. Essentially, we focus on solving business problems with a collection of tools, products, services, platforms, and knowledge. And I'm really kind of excited to talk about this. This is one of my favorite topics. Really the big core is we're talking about risk and mitigation and what we can do to help businesses and nonprofits be able to run more smoothly, as well as stay ahead and stay protected from some of the more riskier things that are out there. And we're not really just, when we talk about cybersecurity and creating a security culture, we're not talking about just law firms and medical offices. That's kind of the most big common known ones. Unless your business or nonprofit operates 100% on pen and paper and all of your money's put in a briefcase on a shelf someplace or underneath the bed, you're open to some sort of cyber risk. So we get into that. We're going to kind of first talk a little bit about the threat landscape and what are the things that we're looking out for and we need to be aware of in everything that we do when we're sitting there, whether we're just responding to emails, working on things in the computer, working on things in the accounting systems, things like that. Technology is constantly changing. The statistics are showing a 34% increase of phishing alone in the last year. And when we say phishing, we're not talking about, we're going down and we're going to go catch some salmon. We're talking about those lovely little emails that you get that say, hey, you need to act now and you need to do this right now. AI, that's a very big buzzword. I know a lot of people probably, maybe have used ChatGPT to help them out with writing an essay or something like that, or maybe even a letter. It makes our life easier, but these advances are also making it easier for the bad guys, the threat actors out there. Supply chain attacks, where it is, are you, aware of what your vendors are doing? How are they protecting themselves? They are ever increasing. I know just about a month ago or so, Power School was breached. And that I know directly affected, Petoskey schools here and the surrounding school systems. And essentially what happened is somebody sat in a room and they said, we can't hit, one school directly, or we can't hit all schools directly, but hey, wait a minute, what are they using? And that same thing goes for, whether you're in the financial industry, whether you're in a medical industry or in a retail industry, they're looking for what are you using and what could you be using? And can we use that as a way to get into you? Even though your password may be secure, what if someone into it doesn't have their stuff secure? It's going to come down the line, essentially. IoT is a very fancy terminology for the Internet of Things. So we're talking your Ring cameras, your Roku TVs. And I know at this point, you're already thinking this guy has a really tight tinfoil hat. But these are all the pieces of the puzzle that create points of interest, essentially. And unfortunately, something as small as an improperly set up little camera that you've got plugged in could be the downside to finding a way in and getting all of your information. Remote work has been a huge increase since COVID. Personal devices, if people are using those for work things and they're not maintaining them correctly, we see a lot of kids games and things like that, and trying to play with those, and letting family members even potentially using work devices. We've got to focus on those things and really work on keeping that more protected and locked down. Especially even if you're working from home, and let's say you bought a router from Walmart. I'm sure everyone on here has probably done this at one point. When you bought that router, you probably plugged it in and said, okay, it works, but there's actually about 4 things that need to be done right outside the box. And if that's not done, it could take a guy like me maybe about 60 seconds to try to get into that. And we'll have a little bit of proof of concept of what that looks like here as we get into this. So the first most important step, this has been beaten like a dead horse by pretty much every IT provider in the industry. But it starts here, and it starts at the network. So, and by this, we're talking firewalls, we're talking endpoint protection, we're talking utilizing VPN. Even if we're just going to go down to roast and toast and sit there with our laptop and maybe get caught up because we just need to get out of the office, we should still be connected to a VPN while we're down there. And what does this kind of look like? So, the proof of concept, there is a website out there anyone can go to. It's called shodan.io. This search here took me approximately 60, 90 seconds or so. I just basically just put in Petoskey, and the results show here. We're actually looking at the Bindican gas station there across from Brown Motors. You're actually looking at the inventory that's in their tanks, and that's the type of data that can be intercepted. It looks like Pro Image has a micro tick router that has some open information that could also be accessed. I do highly recommend that if you do go to this site and do poke around, do be careful, because too many mouse clicks and it can be into a dangerous path. And kind of a step further of what that looks like. So here we picked on Kalamazoo, just to kind of throw a wider net. And again, I didn't really want to, put a big amount of time into being a hacker, because I'm not a hacker. That's not what I do. We solve problems and we work to prevent those hackers. So what we're looking at here is somebody's Facility Explorer by Johnson Controls. This is the web interface. If I wanted to take the time and throw an algorithm attack at it and try to figure out what those credentials were, then it would just be the matter of, I wonder what kind of buttons we could press to interrupt the flow of this facility. Maybe we can turn their AC on to 40 degrees, and it's February right now. So this all is kind of the baseline. So we need to start at the network, and we need to start at that core piece. But then a lot of this boils down to the people and to your team. And as we get into, after we get the foundation, we get into that security culture. And social engineering is one of the biggest attack vectors. And and this all started years ago when the first phishing email was ever sent out. But since then, they're getting more and more complex and harder to understand unless we're paying attention and we're constantly vigilant, essentially, of what we're looking for. So, phishing emails. Everyone here, I'm sure, has gotten one, whether it's a Microsoft account, Facebook account, bank account, this account, that account. Pretexting, Microsoft is never going to call you. If you get a phone number, and this could be your IT provider, and hang up, call them back directly. Here's I have to work really hard to get them to call us sometimes. And so do 1,000 other IT providers that are Microsoft partners. Baiting is using a combination of virtual attacks like phishing, and maybe even throwing in like rewards or bonuses, or those class action lawsuit announcements that you may or may not see. Special upgrades for Adobe. We're trying to get you to act now. That's also goes into things like, if we see it on Facebook to buy, or if we're looking around for deals or trying to find a new software to maybe replace something that we're using right now. Don't click on that first link. Be careful with some of those funnels out there, because they're just trying to find ways to get your information, get your attention, and bring you in there. Vishing, this is a big, huge increase. The spoofing of phone numbers. Right now, it would take me probably 4 minutes to remember how to get to the screen in our PBX system. And then from there, essentially, I can put in any phone number I want, and I can make that our caller ID. And this is common with pretty much every VoIP system that's out there, from like Ring Central, 8x8, just to kind of name a couple. It's a super, super easy thing to do. So, hang up the phone if you get a phone number and somebody's calling you, even if it's something as simple as it could be the pharmacy, and because they may have that information, and we'll get into how they have that information already, which is kind of got a little bit of funniness to it. So the scareware, I'm sure everyone here has seen one of these guys. When you see this, remember to close everything down, reboot your computer, and pick up the phone and call an IT professional. Because what happens is there's nothing actually wrong with your system, but unfortunately something got clicked on, and they've got a little pesky guy in there that's going to pop up and try to trick you and try to rope you into this. And to make sure that we're paying attention for things like this, and remembering the fact that no one is ever going to ask you to call them. So how do they get all this info that I'm talking about? So I'm sorry for Amy at Harbor Brand to have to put you on blast here, but essentially it's low hanging fruit. So they're using technology to comb through your websites, comb through your social media pages. They're taking analytics from third parties, and they don't care. They are fisher people. They're throwing a wide net out, and they are hoping that they're going to get something. So we know from looking at Amy's bio here, she started her career in 1997. She started at Harbor Brand in 2011. She is now the VP of Operations. So I bet she has access to a lot of really cool and useful information. Her husband's name is Rob. She likes to travel. Her daughter's name is Maya. She's got 2 cats, 2 dogs named Philly and Askham. And we now have the start to work on attack and be able to target her. And we could probably even guess a password or two, because I'm sure we're all guilty of using our kids or our pets' names and a few important dates when it comes to creating our passwords. Using the same tools that those salespeople are using. If you've gotten cold calls from other places trying to sell you services, sell you products, these are the same tools that these bad guys are using. They're coming here and they're just going through these databases, and we've got to remember the fact that these aren't kids in a basement. These are professionals that work out of a high rise sometimes, and they might even be wearing a suit to work, and clocking in at 8 a.m. or, whatever time it is, just like you probably do. Going through public databases with human and robot power, scanning public records to get as much personal detail compiled into their database as much as possible. And essentially, as they build these massive databases with all of this information, then it's easy for them to then take their algorithm and send that out and start dialing, and just dialing and dialing until we get lucky and they can find somebody who is going to unfortunately fall for it. So one of the other things is through other data breaches, things that may show up on the dark web. So this here is another free tool, which I'll get those links and I'll get those dropped in the chat here. This is a website that's called Have I Been Pwned? And what you can do is you can actually come in here, and in this case, we picked on Lisa, and we dropped her email address in here. With that, we found out that she's had some information, unfortunately, leaked from the websites of Apollo. Looks like there was some MongoDB instances, so which is some sort of database tool that somebody was using. Canva in 2019, data enrichment exposure from another site here. Looks like then demand science peer incubation. And this is essentially because, these are what, when we go back and we're talking about those vendor attacks, those supply chain attacks, that's what they're doing with this. So by attacking the supply chain, by attacking sites like Canva and Apollo, we're now getting real people's information. And as we get more and more of that information, now we've got the base to start finding ways to come at them. So 66% of these attacks focus on the supplier's code. 58% are aimed to access data. And then 62% of the attacks are essentially just to exploit the trust that you have in your suppliers and your vendors, because everybody wants to be able to trust their vendors. And 62% of those attacks rely on malware. One thing I've seen through one of these locally was one where it was a sales rep who who was having issues sending a file. Now, in this case, this was actually did turn out to be a real sales rep, but the precautions and the pieces were there. So he started off by saying, hey, I'm having issues sending this file to you, which is a very common methodology. So then, okay, I'm going to go ahead and send this from my personal account. And anyone can make a personal Gmail account. They don't require any identification, verifications, or any of those fun things. So then in that case, here, let's send all these PDFs and zip files from this personal account. Now, fortunately, they did the due diligence, verified the vendor was there. We verified who that person was, verified that that was their emails. But, had that due diligence not been done, then, and had that not actually been that real person, they could have opened those things and they could have just allowed malware or ransomware or any of these other wares to essentially start infiltrating their organization and see what kind of damage they could take over. So again, they're focusing at the third-party software, they're focusing at the vendors. A couple cases of this is March in 2023, desktop app 3CX, which is used as a VoIP system, fell victim to supply chain attack. And what they did is they basically found a flaw and dropped themselves in there. And that actually led to the risk of tens of thousands of organizations getting their data potentially infiltrated. MoveIt, which is a transfer tool, which is ironically enough renowned for securely transferring sensitive files, was targeted as well in a supply chain attack in 2023. That affected over 620 organizations. And little did they know it was because they thought that they were securely sending their files, but somebody had kind of gotten in the way. I'm sure Everyone on here has probably heard of Equifax's fund issues that affected over 147 million people. I believe they're actually still doing adjustments for that one. And then, unfortunately, the big one last year in our own back steps was McLaren's breach of 2024. And then in that case, there's actually a lot of practices that connect back to McLaren via VPN traffic for things like files, x-rays, and information. So, by them getting hit through one of their vendors and through their supply chain, then that creates the trickle effect and then can come down. Fortunately, since then, McLaren has gotten things back in order and has gotten operations smooth back out. So I know that was a very, very fun time for everyone for a good month there waiting to see what was going to happen. And so, so we know what's out there. We know what we have to watch out for. The things that are there. So what can we do? It all comes down to how do we mitigate that risk, and how do we put the steps in place so we're not leaving ourselves just wide open. Big key to that is things like password management, utilizing strong passwords, using multi-factor. Multi-factor, that's that little thing where they may text you a code. If they email you a code, which that's a whole other conversation about the security of that. Really, the best case is to use an application such as like Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, Duo, Keeper Security, and so forth, just to kind of make sure we've got those in place and those secured and those MFA codes. Making sure we're doing regular software updates. Patching vulnerabilities right now is a very big time. Windows 10 is hitting its end of life in October. So this is the same thing that happened with Windows 7, Windows XP. And essentially Microsoft has said, okay, October, we're done. We're not going to put any more development into this product. And what that means is they're not going to be doing any more security updates or anything like that. And they're doing those because as these threat actors are constantly finding ways into things, that's why they release those updates. So, I'm not going to say that October 25th, your Windows 10 box is going to be attacked, but it is the matter of time until it happens, unfortunately. So we want to get ahead of that as much as possible. And then to take it into a more advanced measure, then we get into what we in the industry call zero trust. And again, this is more of that tinfoil hat, I guess, per se, but essentially making sure that we are limiting access to what or who truly needs that access, making sure things that are in your organization can only talk to what they need to talk to, so that if your printer maybe is set up from your print vendor and doesn't have the most secure password on it, or maybe isn't getting the latest firmware updates, nobody wants their printer to be, essentially the downfall to their business. So we want to make sure that we keep that separated and we're only allowing the right things to happen there. Intrusion detection systems, essentially this is a fancy word for looking out the window and seeing what's trying to come in and come talk to our organization, and monitoring and blocking that suspicious traffic. We kind of actually joke about it here of how often we see traffic from, you guessed it, if you're curious, Russia and China and so on. We've seen even Ukraine and things like that. These are real traffic numbers coming into organizations here in Petoskey and in northern Michigan. Data encryption, we're talking about simple things as far as even enabling BitLocker, which is built into your PC. Or if you're a Mac user, you might have heard of FileVault. Making sure that we have those things turned on. And making sure too that, like, if we're going to send sensitive information like emails, If we're onboarding a new employee, or if we're sending information over to a new vendor, let's say we've got social security number information, things like that, or driver's license information. We got to get that over to our accountant, making sure we're encrypting that email before we send that over, because that unfortunately can be intercepted somewhere along the way. Cloud security, implementing secure configurations and access controls. So most cloud software that's out there, yes, it works out the box. We'll pick on Microsoft, for example. Yes, you can go to Microsoft, you can buy a Microsoft business subscription, and you can get in there and you can start using Word and PowerPoint and Outlook. You can, get in there and you can add your domain and start doing emails, but there is a whole slew of checkboxes and things on the backside that actually need to be gone through to make sure that the right security configurations are in place. Fortunately, Microsoft has realized that a lot of these have been missed over the years, so they've started to implement some security defaults, and a lot of other companies are starting to kind of implement some more security defaults. But at the end of the day, their job is to sell you software. Their job isn't to set it up for you and make it secure for you. They're delivering their product and they are leaving that portion up to you. And a lot of that is in those lovely little terms and conditions that I know I never read. It's a whole lot of small print, and who's got the time for that, right? But essentially just understand that there's probably a gotcha in there someplace. So now that we've got the tools covered, let's talk about the people. This security culture and this mindset to keeping our organization secure and being focused to try to remove that risk from us so we can go about our day and focus on the things that matter. So we're going to conduct regular security training, phishing simulations, and we need to focus on reducing the human error, because human error does unfortunately take up a lot of this. Having defined security policies, acceptable use, incident response plans, and setting expectations, those need to be part of your employee onboarding. Even things like bringing your own device to work, email usage. And there needs to be active involvement from leadership to drive this from a top-down commitment. And it needs to be a core part of an organization's operations. And, everyone needs to be on board. And one of the cool ways that, to kind of do this is there's more and more tools out there available. So like one we've got here is we've got a gap analysis. So this is kind of one of our little tools here. And a lot of these security awareness training programs have these, and where we're going through and we're evaluating what is your staff members' knowledge, what are your team members' knowledge, and could they be a risk to your organization? We're checking things like passwords. Are we using strong passwords? Is Billy at risk to leave his laptop open at Roast and Toast, walk away from it to get a sandwich, and come back and maybe it's not there, or someone's took pictures of somebody's financial information that's up on the screen? Whether we're working remote or using public Wi-Fi, the social engineering aspect. Is Lindsay going to know what to do when quote unquote tech support calls her? Is social media, is Susie, we go back there. Is Susie going to share insider information without even thinking she's doing harm because she's posting to her friends on Facebook? Mobile device security. If someone's got their email and apps on their personal phone, how do we get that off of there? Are they making sure it's password protected? Unfortunately, theft of these devices is very, very easily. I got one guy I know who just last year was out on vacation in Chicago, wasn't thinking about it, was sitting down having a slice of Giordano's pizza, and a guy came by with a rose and left with his cell phone. Fortunately, he did have Find My set up on his device and was able to click a button with his watch actually to factory reset and wipe his cell phone. But had he not had those things set up, then there was a lot of sensitive information that could have been gained off of that phone. Checking cloud security, internet email usage, your work emails, they aren't for Netflix. They're not for personal usage. We need to be making sure that we're using our work emails for work and we have a clear separation with that. Your team and everyone are your most valuable assets to keeping your organization secure and safe. So again, with those, those policies, the biggest ones that we find important is the acceptable use. What should your staff be doing with their devices, with their email access? Bringing your own devices, making sure we're keeping our personal devices connected to the guest network or anything that's not on the actual company organization network. Making sure we're not using emails for personal information. And then every organization needs to have some sort of incident response plan. What are you going to do when everything starts flashing red? And one big tip of advice is we never use the word breach. We say something like an incident or a discrepancy. In order to kind of work through and get through and figure out where the issue may have been at. That top-down approach, leaders lead by example. Everyone in the organization should be and needs to be involved in this security focused mindset. And these conversations, they have to start at the top with ownership and leadership. And then from there, we have to communicate the expectations and we get everyone on board. And everyone who touches or accesses technology needs to be accountable. Those policies need to be, again, part of the employee onboarding. Security awareness training scores and reporting phishing should be a part of your team member reviews. If Susan is doing a great job and every time she gets a phishing email or a suspicious email and she's reporting that and saying, hey, this happened, that should be rewarded in whatever way you might find. Make this a topic of your weekly or monthly meetings. I know security sounds boring and this stuff, it doesn't seem fun. There's so much other fun things we can do, but we have the ability, we can make it fun. We can make it a part of our life. I know, and of course, since we're in the industry, we are constantly kind of cracking jokes about some of the different things we see and come across, the emails that we may see and the good old Nigerian print scams that still do exist to this day. And that zero trust approach. So essentially technology has become your greatest resource. And it's also easily taken for granted. We have to maintain vigilance. We have to limit our trust. And if you've been paying attention to the politics for the last 8 years, or have read the news for all of the new cyber attacks and hacks alone, this getting more and more predominant. And the more that we take it for granted, the easier it's going to be for something unfortunate to happen one day. So that strong security posture and that culture involves utilizing the right tools and the right services. Things like the password managers and endpoint security, those are kind of the basis to it. There's a lot of free tools out there like Malwarebytes, Wireshark, Have I Been Pwned, things like that, that offer excellent abilities to kind of help out, but understand that these aren't full solutions. They're limited and they're useful in a pinch, and they're not the grounds to a secure foundation. And of course, we're going to recommend that you work with a dedicated MSSP, managed security provider, or at least an MSP, just a managed services provider, or at least a professional, somebody that is in this industry and understands what tools and things like that to help guide you, because there is a lot and it is constantly changing, and we have to keep learning more. So with that said, thanks for joining this. I know there was a lot there, and kind of a lot of information. I try to keep the acronyms and stuff down to a minimum, and I know we overran time a little bit here. But just remember that implementing the foundations and making this a topic of discussion is important to help you strengthen your organization and keep it protected, keep things safe, so that you can keep going, your team can keep going, and everything can run smoothly with minimal risk.
Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat box. Lots of great information there. Love the focus on the security culture, and I think about acceptable use policy as well as incident response plans. I'm sure many of our small businesses, with all they juggle day to day, and kind of what you said, Ross, that cybersecurity is something everyone should be working on, thinking about, but it's not the fun thing. People tend to focus on the other fun things. So I liked your idea there of rewarding employees for their behavior, when they are reporting a phishing attack or something. Having that culture, having that awareness, and rewarding that behavior.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things. It doesn't have to be the bump in the room or the scary thought. If we embrace it and we make it a part of our regular activities.
Mhm.
I did just put those links in there too, by the way. So that form, that gap analysis, that's a Microsoft form. And we basically took the 36 question gap analysis test that we send out with our security awareness training. So you can go on there and kind of test yourself and kind of see where you may be at. And it's always interesting. I know there's a couple good questions that even made me have to think twice.
We've got a question in there. Being a really small business and cannot afford an IT company, what basics can an owner do to protect themselves without knowing all these fancy computer terms?
I essentially it's got to be something. We have to budget for it. We have to find a way to fit that into our operating expenses. The same way we fit in fuel, we fit in materials, staff, and things like that. And it needs to be kind of budgeted and planned for. And then from there, just trying to figure out, okay, what are our needs? So what are we doing? What tools are we using? And where that risk is going to be at. And unless the risk has truly been evaluated, no matter the size of your organization, whether you're working for a financial company and you're just a single operator, we've got to evaluate what you're doing and where that risk is at. And then from there, we create the plan. Things like Norton and stuff like that, it works, it covers the basics. It's going to tell you if you've downloaded something that's bad, but it's not really constantly looking. But it's at least a start and it gets you someplace. But then as you continue on, making sure that we're finding a place to budget so that we can start implementing more procedures and more things to keep you protected. But it has to be a plan and a part of our regular business operations.
Yep, exactly. One other question. if a box shows up on my computer that looks like Norton and says I have a problem, does that mean they've gotten into my computer and know my password and I don't have Norton?
So that's a scareware.
Yeah.
So there's no real proof that anyone's truly gotten in there. I mean, we see a lot with like if we're going to try to go to a website and we end up Google searching it and we click on that first link, never, ever, ever, ever click on that first link, because that's likely just someone throwing an ad in there to look like it, and they're going to redirect you. But basically, if that box pops up, don't respond to it. Reboot that machine, and then if it keeps coming back, then you're going to need to find an IT professional, IT company to go through and at least just get that off of there, because they're hoping they're going to annoy you to death until you respond to them. That's their end goal, is to annoy you until they get what they want.
Yeah, well, great. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Ross, again, thank you so much for sharing all this information. We are recording this and we will put it out through the various channels that the Chamber has. And again, we also want to say thank you to Odawa Casino for their support for our 2025 Winfluence programming. The Chamber has a lot of additional great programming coming up. So be sure to look at our website, read the emails, and thank you for participating today. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.